Hey guys, have you ever wanted to know how to make a luxury pair of denim jeans? These were inspired by a pair of Levi's that I came across. Stay with me to the end of this video and I promise you I will teach you every step you need to know of how to make denim jeans. Starting off making these jeans, start with the pockets, and there's really no right or wrong way basically. I've used a that's quite simple. Started by folding the top of the pockets, double folding them in, and then jumping onto my twin needle machine. And guys, if you don't have a twin needle, you can either get a single needle machine and just do the rows twice, or on some domestics you can actually buy twin needle kind of attachment, but I find them a bit too fussy. So at this point here, I'm folding the edge of my pockets in. And if you're not confident at this point, you can get what's called a stencil, whereas it's the shape of the pocket, but 1 centimeter smaller. And then you just press the fabric over the card stencil. So it's really important that you use card to make the stencil. And obviously you want to double check that everything is according to the original pattern piece. And more importantly, you want to align the corners of both pockets, especially if it's a symmetrical design. Put the edges together, check that everything matches, because all these little details will show up when it's on the garment. So the next stage is I've marked the pockets at the back of my jeans, and then I'm going to start sewing them. Now I could have stitched it with a twin needle, but I'm going to use my single needle industrial for this. And if you notice, when I've started sewing the pocket on the edge stitch, I haven't done any kind of back stitch. And I'll explain the reason for this shortly. I'm using a 1mm edge stitch to do my first row of stitching, and then as I always do with my corners, I stop with the needle down, lift the foot, pivot, foot down, and then carry on going, and that ensures that you have a really clean, sharp corner. What I'm doing there is I'm tucking in the raw edges of the pocket, so just to make sure everything's hidden. Cool. Now at the top of that pocket there, I'm coming back on myself. I'm using the hand wheel to turn the needle 3 stages forward. And then I'm just coming back doing that second row. And this is where I was saying you can do that on a twin needle, but I just wanted to do it on the straight stitch because for me it feels more comfortable doing it in that way. So that's creating a really beautiful stitch. And I guess what you want to have done before you even start making the jeans is check your tension. When you're making them, where what makes it look luxurious is the tension. We want a really crisp stitch line. And what you've noticed there is that I didn't do any back stitch. I finished the pocket where I'd started, and then now I've moved on to attaching on my back yoke using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Then obviously I've done the same on the other side. And then I'm going to overlock that together and then jump on my twin needle and top stitch that down. Now this is something that you can do using a different kind of seam called a run and fell. And that's basically like a finish that find on a lot of industrial made denim that doesn't require any overlocking, where the top seam has curved in like that, then the bottom seam is curved in, and then it locks in, and then it does the twin needle. But with that you need a particular attachment. So at this stage I have started to do it's called a ticket pocket for my front pockets. And a ticket pocket is actually sometimes it's called a coin pocket. So this is the little pocket that is in that front right pocket that you normally get on jeans. And I've used my twin needle to do the fold over for the top pocket. I'm going to use again to attach the ticket pocket to the backing of that pocket facing. Cool. So that's looking really nice. So the next stage is I'm gonna overlock the edges, but that comes later on. What I'm doing here is quite unique, and it's more seen on luxury trousers, and that's where you'd use a fusion tape to line the pocket and stabilize the pocket shape. Because you know that each time you're putting your hands in the pockets, you're wearing out the fabric. So this fusion tape just helps to keep things stable and increases the life of the garment, really. So you don't have to do it, but if you're making expensive stuff, all these little details count. You know, the customer won't see it, but you as the maker, if you really care about the construction of the garment, these are the kind of things that you pay attention to. Yeah, so this is where I'm overlocking the backing of the front pocket bags. And notice how these are being done in denim, because this is the part that will be seen when the are constructed. So I'm attaching the backing on the actual pocket bag itself, just with a straight stitch, just on that curve. And if you notice that I've used a what's called like a cotton or silicea, which is what they use for pocket bags, which is a very strong fabric. And with jeans, you very seldom do you see the pocket bag made from the denim as well. Normally it's a polyester or a cotton variant, because it's lighter in the weight, it's softer, so it's more comfortable when it's rubbing against your upper thigh. So the way I'm doing the pocket bag here is I'm bagging out the pocket bag just purely because of the finish that I want. You can just overlock the edges. I just want it to be a little bit more fancy with my finishing. And just finally doing that edge stitch, just to keep the edging of the pocket bag nice and crisp. That will last a number of washes. And then next I'm sewing while I'm attaching my pocket curve of the pocket bag with the front leg. So I'm sewing the pocket opening using a 5mm seam allowance and sewing into that fusion tape. So one thing you want to do when you sew curves is that you want to cut into the curves, little tiny snips. Don't go any further than the stitch line. What that does is it relaxes the fabric so that when you turn it around the correct way, the fabric sits nice and flush, and then you're ready to do your sink stitch, or it's an edge stitch into the lining only. So this is where all the fabric faces inwards and your top stitching on the lining only, because what that then allows the fabric to do is sit a certain way that allows the right side of the fabric to fold over nicer, and it means that there's no unsightly under fabric kind of rolling over. So when you get to do your top stitching, as I'm doing now, the fabric is behaving in the way that you want it to. Now I'm doing 2 rows of stitching because that's just the theme of this particular style of trouser that I'm doing. But you know, 1 row of stitching is enough. And take your time doing that curve, because you don't want to have any of the fabric for the pocket bag to pucker. And obviously I'm going to do the same on the other side. There are these attachments that can ensure that when you do an edge stitch, you get it perfect. They're probably about 12 to 15 pounds, but I tend to use the guides on the machine. So at this point here, I am doing a hold and stitch, attaching the front leg of the jeans to the pocket bag. So I'm doing that at the side seam, and I'm doing it at the top of the pocket bag. And this is so that the whole pocket and the front leg move as one. Because the last thing you want is for different bits to be flapping around, then you end up stitching over them, and the whole thing becomes a nightmare. So these extra little steps, they're really important to your final finish. So at this point here, I've started my fly facing, well, my fly front. This is the zip or button guard that for menswear goes on the right hand side of the garment. And this is what is called the actual button stand. So because I'm opting to do buttons and not a zip, the buttons will be eventually hammered into this particular piece. So once that's done, I'm just going to do a quick hold and stitch that's attaching that onto the right hand side of the right leg. So this piece here, this is a two-piece. This is what we call the buttonhole placket, and this is where you've got 2 layers of fabric, and this will sit behind the fly facing, because your buttonholes for this design is going to be concealed. So I'm overlocking the edge, and the next stage will be, well, I'm overlocking the edge of the fly facing and the button stand, the buttonhole stand, which ironically are the same shape, but they serve a very different function. Overlocking the crotch for the right side of the jean leg, and then that's overlocking the center front crotch for the left side of the jean leg. Now at this point I'm marking my buttonholes on the buttonhole stand only, so make sure you don't mark anywhere else. And before you insert or attach your buttonhole stand to the garment, you have to do the buttonholes, because if you do it any later, after you've attached it, it becomes so much more difficult. And we're using a Reece 101 keyhole buttonhole machine. That link should pop up any moment now. I've got a video tutorial on how to use this wonderful machine. Cool, so now I am attaching the fly facing and using a 5mm stitch, and then doing my edge stitch, ensuring that all the seams are facing towards my right. Now this is where it happens. I'm attaching the buttonhole placket onto my facing. And notice how I'm doing that whilst the facing is spread flat. So that's what it looks like with the facing folded back. The stitching is looking really, really nice. Now the next stage is optional, because what I generally do is with trousers, I sew the inside leg first. So I put the right sides of the back and front together, sew the inside leg using that 1.5cm seam allowance, and then I'll overlock each leg individually. So you end up with 2 halves of your trousers basically. Cool. So once I've overlocked that seam, I just run it through the twin needle machine. I guess what you guys aren't seeing is that for every stage that I go through, I'm going back to the ironing board and pressing the seams so they sit nice and flat, and that makes the stitching process a lot easier because it just means that the fabric behaves itself. So we're probably just past the halfway point, I'd say, of making this, this garment. Now, the reason why I sew the kind of garment that way, where I do one leg and the next, is because I like to sew the crotch in one straight seam. So what I'm doing here is top stitching that, that fly guard, which is actually my, my button stand. It's not the fly guard when you're using a zip. And then you basically position both fronts together, right sides together, and then you start, I'd say about 1 centimeter higher than where the guard starts or where it ends from, whichever side you're looking at it from. And then you stitch your crotch seam all in one go and ensure that you match your inner leg seams as you stitch that together. I mean, one thing that I sometimes do is I will do 2 rows of stitching for the crotch seam just to give it added strength. Sometimes you'll see what's called a chain stitch, where you've got 1 row of stitching at the top, then there's 2 or 3 kind of chunky threads at the bottom. And the purpose of that is just to add strength at the crotch seam. So here I'm doing a bit of a cheat sheet and using a stencil that will guide me for the shape that I'm going to stitch down my my fly facing. And ideally you want to stitch it from the top because that's how you're going to get the most crisp looking finish. So you've used a chalk mark to draw that line. So what I've done is instead of following instead of stitching on the chalk mark, I've stitched like a foot's width next to it, done that first row of stitching, and then done the second row on the actual chalk mark. I really hate seeing trousers where this this fly seam isn't stitched neatly. It really brings down the quality of the garment. So once that's done, then I run this through the twin needle machine and top stitch my crotch seam all in one go. But I take my time and make sure that I use the hand wheel to manually position the needles in line with the bottom of that curve so that there's a nice clean finish. The vertical seam meets horizontal seam. Now this is where you actually want to use quite thick needles. I'd recommend the size 100 needle because at this point where the 2 crotch seams are meeting, you're probably dealing with about 6 to 8 layers of fabric. And that's a lot of fabric for a needle to punch through. So getting those size 100 needles, they normally will do the job. Alternatively, you can steam those really thick areas. Apply a lot of steam and then gently with a hammer, just hammer it whilst the fabric's soft. And what that does is it allows the fabric to compress down. And when you're sewing, that would mean that the fabric can easily feed through without any kind of staggering or any kind of puckering. Cool. So see here, I'm having to really take my time just to feed through that join where the back yoke meets together, because that's another area that can cause a lot of problems when you're sewing. Cool. So we're near the finish line. I'm sewing the outside leg together. Now, because I've used this beautiful Japanese denim, I don't need to do no overlocking. So I'm literally just doing a straight seam all the way down, making sure my top and bottom layer married together. Nice. And then doing the same on the other side. Obviously I'm having to flip it around, but whichever direction you want to do it for, that's completely your choice. Just make sure your seams are looking neat and sitting together. Cool. And then I've positioned all the seams on that side seam pocket to face towards the back. And I'm just doing a 1mm edge stitch just on the top of the pocket, and you can feel the bulk underneath. And that's just to keep that area of fabric in place so it doesn't flap around when you're wearing the garment. Now, this technique came to me quite late in my career, and that's where you would stitch your hem with the right side facing upwards. I always used to do it kind of like the inside, but you get a much neater finish. And also you don't want to do any kind of back stitch. So you start with straight stitch, then you end where you started. And then at this point, this is where I'm making my loopers, using a strip of denim that I've fused, overlock both sides. You fold one side, apply a lot of steam, and you fold the next side. Then you should end up with a nicely finished strip of fabric that you can then run under the twin needle machine, and that should be pretty easy. Obviously, if like I said, if you don't have a twin needle, then you can use just a straight stitch. It will just take you a little bit longer, but don't worry about that. You know, this is a case of quality over quantity, guys. So at this stage here, I'm attaching my my loops. I've cut them to the correct measurement. So I'm just doing a basting stitch, just putting them in place, doing the stitch in two phases, where the first stitch is to place them, the second stitch is slightly further down. It's normally about 1 centimeter down, and that's where the loop is going to fold back on itself to sit above the waistband. Now, annoyingly enough, because I've used the Japanese denim, it's not very wide, so I've had to cut my waistband in two pieces, because ideally I would have had one long piece that folds over. And that's how a lot of denim is made. But because it's Japanese denim, you do have to compromise in that area. So I'm just doing my 1 cm allowance stitch seam here. And then I'm using the selvage, which is actually going to be on the inside of the waistband. But at this point here, I'm just doing a edge stitch, but making sure that all of the fabric faces towards my selvage. Now, if you just saw there's a little join at the back, which is where I've had to join the waistband. And now this part here is where I have to make sure that that seam matches with the center back of the actual jean. Otherwise, it's just going to look horrible, and like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. So once you stitch that back part in place, that's going to hold, and that would allow you to then stitch your waistband onto your trousers. And you'll feel you're going over those loops. So again, use a thick needle. And just double check as you go through, once you stitch the loops, that they're not shifting. So next, once you've done you've attached the waistband fully, you want to kind of bag out your waistband. And you can do it two ways, where you're doing it like I'm doing it in this footage here, where I'm stitching it on the end and then bagging it out. Or what you can do, like the video where I've made this denim jacket that I'm wearing now, is that I've pressed all the edges in, and then you sandwich it together, and then you stitch around on top. And I'd say that process is a bit harder, but I think you get a nicer finish where you fold everything, where you double fold everything like it's binding. But anyway, you then top stitch your waistband using I'd say a 1 or 2 millimeter edge stitch from the center front of the waistband all the way across the top of the waistband where you've got that fold. Be careful not to sew any of your loopers down yet. Nice. And then give that a good press. And then with your twin needle or single needle, stitch your waistband closed. Make sure that the facing of the waistband is sitting nice and flat. You don't want nothing to be folded. And this is one of those areas that you want to do once. I know that sounds a bit nonsensical because obviously we're sewing everything you want to do one time, but there's certain parts of a garment that unpicking really isn't going to work. So this is where the preparation really comes in handy, and be careful that you're not going to break a needle, which is I think what I've done there actually. And that's just because there was so much fabric underneath. Cool, so this is where I'm using what's called a bar tack machine, and that gives a lovely finish. But the point of it is it does a reinforcing stitch, and I'm using that on the bottom of my loopers. I'm also using it on the, I think this is the back pocket. So you do that at the top of any kind of stress points. So it does this really tight zigzag that adds strength to that particular area. Because obviously if it's pockets, it's going to have a lot of pulling action on it. And if you just stitch that pocket normally with a straight stitch, it probably wouldn't last as long as it would do without a bar tack. So even the front pockets here, that front curve, you want to put your bar tacks there. The thing is, you can never really do too many bar tacks. It's a finish that I really like, and it's a sign of a really well-made garment. Obviously, if you haven't got a bar tack at home, you can use your zigzag function on your sewing machine. Put the width down to a really narrow width, probably like a 2, I think it is on most machines. And you probably want the length of the zigzag finish to be no more than 1 centimeter. That's going to take a bit of practice. Obviously, the bar tack machine presets all the finishing, but if you want that look, it's something that you can do yourself. Cool. So the final part is just doing that last buttonhole on the left-hand side of the trousers, and it's left-hand side because it's menswear. Obviously, women's wear is on the right-hand side. And then I'm gonna just hammer in my buttons, and that's the garment finished. So now it's time for me to model it. So let's do a side-by-side comparison of the Levi jeans that I was inspired by coming up now. And here comes the image of my finished product. Cool. I'm pretty happy with that. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments. In terms of making time, these jeans took me 3 hours and 32 minutes. So I think that's pretty good going. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Let me know in the comments of any kind of ideas for videos that you want me to do in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.